Hi, my name is Michael Madden. Happy to be on Voices of the Future. I have spent most of my career in the payments world, and not just the payments world in the Western world, payments world in the emerging markets world. It's been an adventure. It's been a journey. It's been fascinating. It's a school day every day. It's something I love. It's something I enjoy. And I'm still looking for answers. And that really keeps me fired up and motivated every day.
And real pleasure to have you on Voices of the Future. Michael is like you said, you're an adventurer, but you're also an entrepreneur. You can see around corners. You've done both sort of corporate work on the one side and venture capital work on the other. And the interesting thing about Michael is, as he looks into the future, he goes into countries that people would almost be scared to turn up in, like Myanmar. And I'm going to talk to you about that in a second. So basically, you're bold and brave and courageous, because and when I talk about leadership these days, I said one of the most underrated new attributes that we need is courage. We can talk about nice degrees and stuff, but if you don't have courage to move forward and do things, then really there's no way forward. But wonderful to have you here, Michael.
Thank you.
And you're in great company, and I dare say we will have a lot of fun together in developing this movement, this project, as we go forward. So diving deep into it first, can we talk about little Michael? Was he naughty? Was he running around trying to kill little insects, or were you a nice studious kid, A student all the way through? Tell us about your early life.
I was none of those. So little Michael grew up in a village in rural Ireland, a village of 800 people. Wow. And I say that because, that formed me in terms of who I am today, what I do, the values, how I do my business. So yes, a community of 800 people in this village called Portroe in County Tipperary. And, that village formed me. It didn't raise me, it formed me. That village I still call my home today. That village I still go back to. That village teaches me about humility and to remember where I came from. But of course, the biggest influence was my family, my mom, my dad. But, we didn't have a whole pile. So you had to dream, you had to aspire, you had to want, and you had to be curious. And maybe I didn't recognize that when I was a young Michael, but I was curious. I was the guy asking all the questions. And I said, do not be afraid to ask questions. Do not be afraid to ask stupid questions. Yes. Because if you're searching for answers, don't be afraid in terms of asking questions. But I was curious. I was not the A student. I think you go through life, and if I reflect on my journey, it's only at certain junctions, lights go off. And yes, I moved from that little village and moved on and educated myself and started with a multinational. But that for me was interesting. But that was just the first stop for the train.
Did you actually end up finding a job related to what you were studying? Because a lot of the people that I have in this particular journey that I've spoken to, they did, I don't know, a management degree or an engineering degree and stuff like that, and today they are scientists or doing other things. So our education system guides us in a certain way. Probably doesn't prepare us for the future. So what were your experiences there?
Well, you've just confirmed it for me. That was me. What I studied for just to study, but it's not what I worked at. And I was fortunate that it took a good twist in terms of getting into financial services, because what I was focused on was industrial engineering, which I did not like, but I did do, and it was great. It gave a good base of education. We all need a base of education. You need to build on that, and every day, I keep saying needs to be a school day. You need to build on that and keep learning every day. But I do agree with you, education for me, yes, third level education was important, but it wasn't everything. It's not till really I went into the workplace and then got to understand what is all this about and how does it work. That's when the wheels started to move forward. But I had this background and fortunate to come from a great family, fortunate to come from a great community and great experiences that I took for granted. I didn't think there was anything special about it. But I do realize as I get older, they were very special. And there are things that I hold dear today. And I still go back to that wonderful village and I visit it 2 or 3 times a year to refresh and re-energize.
And also to be grounded, I would say. Basically, you have roots there, and I think you use a beautiful word, humility, and that's an important attribute that I have personally, and that's actually one of the reasons I'm doing this book, because the backstory is that the media calls me voice of the future, because I'm a futurist. It's very flattering,
Mhm.
and everybody was suggesting, "Now you've got a book inside you. Why don't you write a book called Voice of the Future?" And we'll build a brand around it, and we'll be on Instagram and so on. And I fell for my own bullshit for a little while, for about a few weeks, and I said, "Oh yeah, I could do this. I'll be the voice of the future." Blah blah. And by about chapter 2, I stopped and I said, "This is not who I am. I am not narcissistic. I am not egoistic. This is not about me. It's not about my voice." And then I had that aha moment, the eureka moment, where I just added the letter S, and it became Voices of the Future, and everything changed.
Mhm.
The energy that it sort of exploded with was incredible. And now I'm talking to people like yourselves, and I realized that my job was about connecting the dots. My job was, and my person, as a person who I am, I'm the conductor of the orchestra. And others are experts in the field that you're in. But I can somehow bring all of us together and create harmony, create some synchronicities, create a symphony and some music together. And that's my role as we set up into the future and on this sort of journey. And this is how the book evolved. It became Voices as opposed to Voice. And this is an orchestra as opposed to individual pianists or violinists and so on, because that's very ego-driven and vanity-driven. So that's the
I
background.
I think that is great, and it's not clearly it's not about one voice or one answer or one solution.
Correct.
It's really gleaning as you listen to people or have different mentors. You need those words. You need those words of wisdom, as we already discussed, and you need that insight. You need that experience. Now, what you take and how you utilize it, that's another thing. But if you can have access to that and access to the insight in a little sound bite that you can take with you, I think that is so, so valuable.
Indeed. Michael, you said you were in the payments business. Could you just give us a quick glimpse of your career path and how that shaped? Because I've actually been spending, I was in Kazakhstan last week, by the way,
Yeah.
with Halik Bank. And
Okay. Halik Bank. Yeah.
I presented to their CEO and Umut and others, made good impact there. And I found it
Yeah.
very interesting because unlike Dubai, where I am at the moment, where everything is saturated, where people are overwhelmed, there's just too much of everything.
Yeah.
While if you go to Kazakhstan, people were hungry, people were ready to listen.
Yeah.
So that was my experience, and I'm sorry, I'm just veering off a little bit. But my question again to you: your journey as you developed and evolved
Yeah,
within the payments business.
my journey was in the payment space with the American Express company. That's where I started my career in Ireland. I had 5 wonderful years there. But as I looked out into the future, I was like, okay, this does not look, stimulating. I need to do something to shake it up. So at that time, when I, left Ireland at the end of 1992, a lot of people were moving westwards. Michael went eastwards, and that's when I moved with the American Express company to Russia. I went on a look-see in 92 and then moved there. And I remember flying out on the 4th of January 1993 at the tender age of 26 and thinking, what the hell am I doing? But that's the adventure. What was the risk? The risk was just for Michael. You didn't like it, come home.
Sure.
But that was the adventure. And that was probably the most important and one of the best decisions that I ever made, because it was taking me into the unknown. The unknown wasn't the business I was in, the unknown was into the environment that I was moving into. And getting to understand a new culture, getting to understand this country that had come out of the former Soviet Union. It was, I don't think I would have got it in any business school, what I received in those early days in Russia, 93, 94. I went for 1 year, I stayed for 4. But a challenging, was not easy, a challenging experience, but fascinating time, both culturally and professionally.
When did you start moving towards entrepreneurship and starting some of your own ventures and adventures? Because that also helped to shape you to some extent, as I would imagine.
It did, and that's after I finished in Russia. I moved to the UK with American Express, and I wasn't ready to move. And someone said to me, "Well, you should move, because when you want to move, you won't be able." So again, you listen to some words of wisdom, and I took their advice and I moved. I took this job. But what this job gave me was a portfolio of 17 to 18 countries that I developed, that I ran for American Express, but took me into this entrepreneurial world of what I thought was entrepreneurial, of different banks that were licensed to issue cards on the American Express network. And I remember Turkey and the Sabancı Group, and in Greece and in South Africa and in Israel, and some fascinating places where these institutions or these families were doing wonderful things when they had the license for the American Express card. I thought, wow, so refreshing. And I had been, to my mistake, I think I'd been too insular. I'd been always looking in. My world was American Express, a great company. I don't, I took a lot from it, but blaming myself, I was looking too inward and looking through the world through the eyes of American Express. And it's not till I got this exposure to see how these magnificent entrepreneurial families and groups, especially in Southern Europe, had developed, from tire businesses to banks to real estate to hotels. And it's like, okay, I need a piece of this. How do I get into this? How do I get involved in this? How do I step off that multinational train? Because no disrespect to it, it passes your door every day and you can jump onto it. How do I step off it and do something far more entrepreneurial, and do something for Michael Madden? Do something that Michael Madden will have an impact on Michael, me as a person, and in terms of what I'm doing as well.
So the payments business has almost completely transformed since when you started. I mean, we still sort of have a physical card, but we don't really need it because now, obviously, all of the mobility that we have, the environment that we have. And when I talk about cards, when I think about cards, fine, MasterCard, Visa, Amex can grow and develop, and it has a place. But China bucked the trend, because when in the early 90s, when they became independent and post the new system and new environment, they moved directly to mobiles. And so Alibaba and Tencent WeChat and all of those, and Ant Financial was created and stuff like that. 98% of transactions in China are mobile. $77 trillion is 3 to 4x of all payments combined. What is your view? What is your thesis on the fact that here's a country which is, the transactions are massive, while the rest of the world is still catching up with Visa, Amex, MasterCard, and so on, into what is now mobile wallets, and the business is completely changed. So can you just sort of share your insights in the early days, which you sort of did?
Yeah.
But how do we transform ourselves into the future?
Well, the early days, just to set the scene, when I went into somewhere like Russia, these countries were so far behind. Well, Russia, not so from a banking standpoint. They kind of like leapfrog forward into, they're skipping a number of cycles as it relates to the payments world. And I think that's what you're talking about.
Yes,
as
exactly.
It relates to China. The other thing to demystify as well, in my humble opinion, Visa, MasterCard, they don't issue, they don't acquire, they don't have customers. They're like a train station. They're just routing transactions left and right. That's all they do. It really is the banks. I go back to the banks that I talked earlier. They're the entrepreneurs. They then decide to put them on a network like Visa, a network like MasterCard, but really irrelevant at the end of the day. And they only need them, not for domestic reasons. They only need them for settling cross-border transactions, which is anywhere from 15 to 20% of the transactions. And that's why you'll find nuances in every different payment system in every domestic country. So back to where it's going, I'll bring you on then to, I could take you into Central Asia, but let's go down into Southeast Asia, into a country like Myanmar, where I just came back from Yangon on Saturday. Now that country has got its problems, but let's talk about the payment world and imagine everything is great and everything is okay there. Very few bank branches, but who needs a bank branch when we've got this? Because this is the bank branch. We all know that. And that's where a country like Myanmar is going, where, their bank account will be their phone. They probably will never walk into a bank, and everything is QR code. That's what it is. There's no need to hold a physical piece of plastic, not necessary. It'll emulate what's happening in China, but I think it'll go further forward because it has to bring people into the financial services system. When we talk about financial inclusion, it is absolutely critical for economies to grow, that you have financial inclusion, that people can borrow money, can access payment systems to grow their business. I see it, I hear it. I had it all last week when I was in Yangon with the different client visits I was doing when I was there.
And financial inclusion is so important. I mean, a place like Africa, which is burgeoning with opportunities at this point in time. But there are hundreds of millions of people in Africa at this point in time who are not in the included in the payment systems and the digital platforms that are out there. That's why telcos are getting big time involved into that. So MTN, I'm speaking to, who's also going to be on this in this book, Serene. So the head of MTN. Etisalat in Dubai, they've created so basically telcos are becoming fincos and fintechs.
Absolutely.
Because they've got the last mile, they've got the connection.
Well, they've got the last mile, but think of when telcos first started. If they're waiting for the banking system to create a prepaid card, you wouldn't have the penetration of telecommunications as you got today. So basically, they created their own financial services system that wasn't regulated. And hip hip hooray, I think it's brilliant, but recognize that, because regulation is important, but you also need to allow a business to grow. So they grew based on prepaid, and a prepaid card is a financial services product, but they have done a wonderful job. They are the backbone, they are the connectivity. And yes, what you need to do is you need to integrate a payment solution, a very easy, very simplistic payment solution, with that mobile device. And now with the penetration of smartphones, that's what we're seeing in Southeast Asia. The affordability. Before, the smartphone was too expensive. Now you can pick up a smartphone for $10 or $15. You may question the functionality of that smartphone, but it's there, it's affordable. And this is how consumers can start to have access to financial services.
Yeah, I mean, indeed, M-Pesa in Kenya, for example, it wasn't even on a smartphone. It was literally SMS, and it was peer-to-peer. And they're literally dominating the market. And the incumbent banks are now trying to get into countries like Kenya and East Africa and so on. I think they've missed the boat.
I don't think they've missed the boat, because I think there's different players in this space right now. I think if you look at some of the bigger banks, Tariq, they've all gone home after the 2008 crisis. When I went to Russia in the early 90s, I could have listed all the major banks, all the major multinationals that were coming into Russia in the early 90s. No more. If I look at where I am in places like Mongolia, or when we talk about Myanmar again in Southeast Asia, no, it's a different set of players are coming into the market. And it's not the banks, the ones in the traditional businesses that I would say that are more ambitious and take a more long-term view are the insurance companies. They're the new asset gatherers for me. Watch the insurance companies, watch what the insurance companies are doing, especially on the life side. So they're gathering assets, and they in effect compete with banks. but they don't compete in terms of financial inclusion, so they have a complementary role to play. But I do see, especially in Southeast Asia, some of the big insurance companies, and I met with some of them last week as well, and hearing their perspective, and really interesting, very different thinking to how a bank would think. But anyway, banks are no more. It's domestic banks. It's regional fintech companies providing solutions. But payment solutions is one thing. You also need lending solutions. You need to give people availability to credit, and credit in local currency, not credit in foreign currency. But I think I still think it's only at the beginning. It hasn't been unleashed yet, but it will be.
Yeah. The phrase I use, I think in fintechs and in payments, we are about at the end of the beginning. And that's sort of where we are. And now it is at an inflection point, and we can take off. One of the theses that I have is that incumbent banks can probably win 80% of the time if they can out-innovate the challenger institutions and the fintechs that are coming in, because they still have the support of the regulator. They still have the big trusted brand name, even though that's changing. The younger people trust them less, but they're still sort of fairly strong. But once the challenger institutions start getting distribution, then it's game over. That's when they start just taking over, and then they can scale very fast. Digital scaling is 100x faster than any bank can scale, because they're stuck with their core systems and so on. So that's and when I was in Almaty last week, we were discussing this in depth. That's why I'm sort of fresh off the banana boat, and it was quite interesting that they are doing many things, but institutions like Kaspi, they're running circles around them on the payment side. And even if you have a MasterCard or Visa, and you go to the post office or a government institution to pay your salary into a Visa card, it goes in one transaction and the second transaction is to Kaspi, and that's when the payments are happening. So effectively, they're being disintermediated almost completely.
I wouldn't say they're disintermediated as such. I think if you can give a focus on an area of the payments business, very hard for a bank when it's focusing on 5 or 6 areas. I think the role of a bank will just change more from a wholesaling standpoint. But Kaspi and these successful payment platforms still need funding. They still need access to liquidity. They still need banks behind them. So I think there's a complementary role, and I think it's just restaging of the role that banks play in society going forward. And we see that today already, and we also already see that in the Middle East. We already see that in Europe. So banks can't do everything. And isn't it great that banks can't do everything, because it would be very boring. The solutions would be very boring. So I think everyone's got a role, but in terms of innovation and integration, and you talked about telcos, we need that integration as well. But banks will play a role. They will play a role at the backbone, but they will not be no disrespect, I don't see them as being the front-end innovators who are going to give solutions and better distribution. And, banks are usually not good marketeers. You need to get someone from an FMCG company to come in and do all of that. They create products and force them onto customers. I'm generalizing, where if you're an FMCG company, you're coming from another direction. You're creating the product the consumer wants. And I think in today's world, especially in today's world, I know I'm not going to tell my kids what they're going to have and what they're going to use. They're going to decide themselves, and I think that's just the world we're in. And it's a borderless world as well. They're not going to be confined to a market. They'll find the product they want, and they'll get it to work the way they want. And that's most young people today.
So as we're on Voices of the Future, let's start looking a little bit deeper into the future. Are you optimistic, Michael?
I am very optimistic, very, very optimistic. Yeah. I think a few things I like to feed, and I like to feed my enthusiasm. I need inspiration, and it's talking to people like you, Tariq, and talking to other people. But there's one thing I got involved in, was in space travel. So I got involved in space travel in 2008, and I bought myself a ticket because it was my dream to go to space. But I bought a ticket on Virgin Galactic in 2018, And I thought I'd be going to space in 2 or 3 years. And here we are 15 years later, and I'm still waiting to go to space. But I have to say, the journey has been inspirational. I brought my kids on that journey. I've exposed them to it. I've exposed them to the people around that. I was just in New Mexico a couple of weeks ago at one of their launches, and it's more like a family. It's a community. That I feed off that. I think, and I do. I'm desperate. I'm hungry. I want to see that. I want to see our world. Um, and yeah, I am. I mean, I'm talking about this today. What are people going to be talking about in 10 years, 15, 20 years time, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
It's exciting.
One of the things I'm working as far as the book is concerned, my contribution and creation of the content of the book is that there's this convergence of different technologies that are coming in. I call them Gutenberg moments. There are about 25 Gutenberg moments happening simultaneously in all sorts of technologies. Then we are sort of cooking the casserole, and then they are diverging. And as they're diverging, we have a lot of unintended consequences. We also have lots of good surprises, because on those crossover points of different industries, that's where the true magic is, and that's where true creativity resides. What, in your experience, are some of the things that you can sort of start visualizing moving forward, where this abrasion, this convergence, and then the divergence is going to give us opportunities?
Well, I'll give something what I see very straightforward and very simple. And I see it in today's world, and I see it in Southeast Asia today, and we're talking about crypto, we're talking about blockchain. Blockchain is happening, and blockchain, will be the future of the payment system. And it will come off the old rails, and it's going on to the new rails. That is it. And it has to, because we're dealing with yesterday's version. We need to be on a new version. And I think that is where we have to create these borderless worlds. But in saying that, we do need to maintain control. Control maybe is not the right word. We need to maintain balance, because bad actors get into this, and that they're the ones who spoil it for the 99% of the good actors. But we are in a borderless world. We are operating and living in a borderless world today. So the payments world is going to accelerate. You talked about China and the success of the payments world in China. Think about that on a global basis. We've all these pods in these countries, because it's all controlled within a pod of that country. You talk about the blockchain. I don't use the word crypto, but you talk about a token, and that token being a secure way of transacting whatever that token is. That is where we will be. And who knows, by the time you even publish this book, we'll be further ahead, because of the speed and the pace it's moving at. And then just the tools that people will be using to interact. As you said, there's no plastic. Will it even be a phone? It may not be.
Yeah. It's interesting where you're going with this, because I think we are totally in alignment. Now, as we move forward, there's another technology. I mean, to me, blockchain is very closely linked to building trust. It's a broad-based distributed ledger. So when I first encountered blockchain, to me, it was that first thing about building trust. And then I'd like to move to AI in a second. But before I do, how important do you think in this world, in your world of payments, and in the world in general, of the future in front of us, where do you think trust resides? How important do you think that is?
I think it's essential. I think we're in this world, and you don't have to go to an emerging economy. You can come to I don't know whether you call it a Western economy, or I think we need a different descriptor for it these days. And even in the US, trust what? Trust who? Trust what? I think the big issue today, Tariq, is trust what information? Everyone's a publisher. We're short of editors. We're very short of editors, and everyone's a publisher. So I think trust is going to become a bigger issue. And it's a challenge. It's not straightforward.
Indeed.
It's a challenge. And even in my conversations, I think, hang on a minute, why let that person have their point of view? But people are entrenched with their perspective. And it's, in some cases, it's dangerous.
Indeed. And trust, truth, and ethics. My first slide in my keynotes is on trust, truth, and ethics, because AI without ethics, and whether it's machine learning or drones without a moral center, is indeed dangerous. And I call AI as a weapon of mass destruction. And as a WMD, and the reason I say that is that it has properties which nuclear fission doesn't have, because nuclear fission was there 80 years ago, and we put some guardrails around it. But
Yeah.
generative AI actually produces by itself, and it can create and develop and create and develop, which actually potentially makes it more dangerous than nuclear fission, because at least we can block it and control it. And when we talk about AI, and NVIDIA exploded a few days ago on the basis of what's going to happen in the future to AI. But there are no real guardrails. And sadly, we've seen some of the senators embarrassingly, talking to the tech players in the United States. They don't have a clue, and they are the legislators. So all of the institutions that we set up 80 years ago were problems 80 years ago: United Nations, IMF, World Bank, etc., etc. But today we need something completely different. And in the AI world, which is going to be omnipresent and omnipotent, actually. And that's where, to me, trust becomes the root of literally everything that we do, and it becomes an integral part of the future. How do you put those guardrails, Michael? I mean, you've been involved with politics, with legislation, you've been around it, and so on. How do you influence people who are making trillions of dollars by using AI and data and everything in not the most moral way? How do you control
governments? Let's be clear, governments are using it today, and it has happened. And I moved to a country where it was all about propaganda. But I would say in the Western world, propaganda is peddled at a faster rate. But there's other forces and other actors, in my humble opinion, behind that. So I think it's happening, and we can see some of the risks and some of the potential outcomes of that. But we do need better knowledge. We do need better policies. We need regulation that allows the business to grow, not that it puts a blanket on it.
Indeed.
And it's striking that balance. Is it in Abu Dhabi, where they've got a minister for AI, if I'm not mistaken?
It's in Dubai, Omar Olama.
In Dubai, is it?
Yeah.
So I think it's great. It's very progressive. And in terms of some of the investments that have been made as well into the whole industry of AI, but we do need some guardrails. But we need, you're coming on to a couple of different things here, Tariq. We do need better regulation. But this whole world of politics is an issue, because as much as I can criticize it, it's starved of talent. It's starved of, people, who will go into that, people that want to go into that because for different reasons. And I think that is it's a big risk. It's a big threat to the Western world, but we do need it. But who are the people who can do it and do it in a proactive way to allow a business to grow, not to stop a business from growing? And I think that's what the Chinese are good at as well. The Chinese let a business flourish and then regulate it. I think in the US, it's like, keep it down and don't let it flourish, which is, there's a wrong way and there's a right way, but I think all the intentions are positive. There's only be negative about it, but the intentions are positive. But it's how do you strike that balance? But listen, it's happening. I see there's a company called Everseen, which is doing visual AI at the checkout stores. Very, very, very successful Irish company. And you don't need to have a person check you out. It's all done by camera. And I think they're one of the largest companies doing AI, but they're doing it in a very good, ethical way. But it's the other aspects of AI and how people deploy AI upon companies, upon countries, or individuals. And we're seeing some very, very dangerous stuff.
Yeah, indeed. Michael, you started beautifully talking about a little village and home and values. And as an extension of this conversation on AI and technology and digital technology, my belief is that anything that can be digitized will be, because it'll be 1,000,000 times faster and 1,000,000 times cheaper. But anything and everything that cannot be digitized, trust, ethics, love, harmony, critical thinking, judgment, intuition, creativity, imagination, heart, soul, spirit, all of these things cannot be digitized, and therefore they'll be 1,000,000 times more valuable. And that's where we need to focus our education on, our work on, and how to engage with people. And this is where I'm spending most of my time in terms of helping people and say, build your futures around these values, because the tech will be there to enable you anyway. So what are your thoughts in terms of, firstly, is my thesis on the right track? And secondly, what do people like you who are influencers can do things to make sure that we follow these things?
I think you need to lead by example, but your thesis is correct. When I first started out with a multinational, they had these set of values. I was very skeptical about them. But then when I moved and I set up my own business, it's like, this is the rudder. This is how you run your ship. These are the guidelines in terms of if you want to work here or be part of it, you know, this is the value system that you're part of. And I think you have to have your own rudder. And I have taken those values into my own entrepreneurial life and into the life I lead today professionally. And having a value system and recognizing what they are is important. But I think it is by example, because you attract people, you work with people who share those same values. But you need a value system. And if you don't have a value system, I think society is going to be very dysfunctional. Now, how to make sure, you know, we all don't have to be the same. We all need to be different. But, you know, some of those core values are important. And yes, some of those core values I got in that little village called Portreau as I was growing up that I didn't realize I was getting, but they were in my formative years, very, very important. And that's when I said in the opening, yes, that place did form me as well as my family. But I do agree, your values, recognize your values, write them down, understand what they are. Because when someone remembers you in 5 or 6 years' time, they'll remember the values that you stand up to, that you live by at the end of the day.
And yes, indeed. What advice do you give? You're a proud father. What advice do you give to parents in terms of you know, young people growing up, education, social, you know, all the pressures that they have? Sadly, in the West, there's a lot of, in the US, there's a lot of mental health issues also amongst young people. What is your general advice to them in terms of helping these kids to grow up into successful future people?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's the only thing in life that you don't receive any training for. You don't need a license for it either, and you can't fire them, you know? And it's probably the most challenging thing in life. And I mean that in a good way, in a positive way, because your only example is from your own parents. And some of that was probably good and some of that was bad. But if you can recognize that, I think for me, and I'm not doing it perfectly, is enjoy your children, enjoy them, enjoy them, enjoy them. You only have them for a short while at home with you. And I talked about space, the fun of it. And thank God I didn't go up yet. I will be going up. But I brought my kids along this 15-year journey, and it's been excellent to inspire them and show them experience. But I think you have to be curious and get your kids to be curious. Get them to be adventurers. Get them to try, have different experiences in a safe environment with you as well. And I think the most important thing is we all want our kids to be happy. We want to be happy ourselves, and we want our kids to be happy. And that may not be going to Stanford, and that may not be going to Harvard, but they need to be happy in themselves. And I think that is possible in today's world, so it is. And to be happy in your own skin, as we call it, and to be fulfilled, of course, you have to self-motivate yourself every day. But I think that's really important. Do I get that right? No. Is that what I strive continuously for my kids? Go on a camping trip or do experiences, memories, you know, we all do it, but just do lots of those, you know, and that's what I love doing. I probably get more from them than my kids do, by the way, because I'm doing stuff that I didn't do, and I'm doing it with my kids, which is great.
No, it's wonderful that you're touching upon happiness, because I think this is going to be one of the themes in the book, and you will see the strand coming all the way through. There was a little story about a girl at school, a young girl at school, and the assignment was, what would you like to become when you grow up? What would you like to be? And she wrote down on paper, I would like to be happy. And the teacher sort of said, actually, no, you haven't understood the question, little girl. But what would you like to do? And she said, I would like to be happy. Actually, the
Yeah.
teacher doesn't get the question. The little girl
Yes.
did. And I think
Yeah.
happiness
Yeah.
becomes the core of where we are at this moment in time.
Being fulfilled, being happy in no matter what you do. And I've said this for years. It doesn't matter what you do, what career you pick. Just enjoy it, love
Yeah.
it. Wake up with a passion every morning and enjoy it. Life is not straightforward, and it's how you take the corners, because it's not a straight road.
So as we get to the end of this conversation, it's fascinating, Michael. Let's get into a little time travel capsule. I mean, you're into space now. I'm putting a layer of time capsule in there,
Yeah,
and we project ourselves into the future. And we're at your 100th birthday. We're celebrating your 100th birthday. What are
I'll
we
be there, by
celebrating?
the way.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will, because I mean, there are three people on longevity in the book, and for every year you live healthy, you'll add on another 2 years. So if you live another 10 years healthily, you'll have 20, and if you live 20 years, you'll have 40. So you're at not even at half time. So you're you're okay. Um, but on a more serious note, I mean, on a 100th birthday, and I'm trying to get the legacy issue here. What do you see around you? What are you celebrating? What are we celebrating for you? What are we coming to you and saying, Michael, you're the man?
I think it's keeping that curiosity alive, that it wasn't something that was just in your teenage years or in your 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s. Keep that sense of adventure. Be that explorer. Push yourself. Push yourself into uncomfortable things. You can always put the car in reverse, but push yourself. Push yourself. And I think, this thing of retirement makes me nervous, because I think retirement doesn't exist anymore. I think retirement, you retire, and I think you will die, no disrespect to it. You may change, when I say, you may change gears, that is it. But that's what I want to do. I still want to be dreaming. I still want to be curious. I still want to be exploring. And I think in my final few hours before I do pass away, I'll have stopped doing those things, So it's, how do I keep myself mentally fit, physically fit, which is important to keep mentally fit, in my opinion, and keeping yourself motivated and talk to yourself. But Michael, when he's 100, I'd be disappointed if he's still not asking the stupid questions. And I'd be disappointed if he's still not curious. And I'd be disappointed if he's still not exploring, I mean, what is life about, happiness, being fulfilled,
No, indeed, that's a beautiful way to describe your 100th birthday, and I hope we'll all be there to celebrate it. And my final question to you, sir, is if you were to leave a message in a bottle and throw it in the sea, and people might find it in a 5, 10 years, 15 years time, what will that little message say? What will be that quote that we will remember you by?
It may not be a quote, and I'm probably going to reflect on what I've mentioned, and maybe mentioned to you a few times, because that is me, is be curious, be kind, be tenacious, and be happy.
What a beautiful way to end, sir. Curious, kind, tenacious, and happy. Beautiful words, and we'll build our lives and build a lot of our future work around those beautiful words. Michael, you've been an absolute treasure, and you've been amazing, and you've shared your wisdom, your insights. That's, as we were discussing earlier, we've got the knowledge and the information, but that your wisdom and insight, and you use the word curiosity 6, 7, 8 times during this interview. So I dare say we will have a heading around curiosity for the article that we write for you. Anything that you'd like to mention that I may have missed? I know we've gone a little bit longer than expected.
Thank you very much. And one little thing that I did learn from operating in emerging economies and emerging markets, when you live in the Western world, there's a good social system, there's a basket, there's a safety net. But what I did learn from entrepreneurs in emerging markets, failure is not an option. There's no safety net. And I think you'll see that, by the way, with a lot of the entrepreneurs that have come from these emerging economies and come into the US or into Europe. Watch out for these people. partner with these people that come from these economies, because they know how to make magic happen. They may not know everything you know, but they know how to make magic happen. And I always say that with people coming from that part of the world, failure is not an option. They're well trained.
Indeed. Beautiful way to
Tariq,
end
thank you
this.
very much. This has been
Thank you,
wonderful.
sir.
I've really enjoyed it.